North Carolina A&T, it feels good to be back, even just virtually. Thanks for having me join you on your Earth Day celebration. As an A&T alumni, I'm especially proud that your theme this year is environmental justice. Environmental justice is an issue that's near and dear to us at EPA and to the entire Biden-Harris administration. The COVID-19 pandemic magnified the daily injustices that Black, Latinx, Indigenous, and low-income communities face. These are the same communities who are on the front lines of pollution, who disproportionately feel the harmful effects of climate change, and who suffer higher rates of heart and lung disease, and now COVID-19 too. We can't allow these disparities to endanger our communities of color any longer. Advancing environmental justice will be at the heart of our work at EPA because it's our obligation to empower the people who've been left out of the conversation for too long. We believe that every person in the United States has the right to breathe clean air, drink clean water, and lead a healthy life, no matter the color of their skin, how much money they have in their pockets, or the community they live in. At EPA, we will do everything in our power to address long-standing inequities. I hope you will join us in that pursuit by taking what you learned today and committing to working hard towards a healthier, more equitable future for your own communities. Thank you, Aggie Pride.
To join us and offer those special greetings and welcome for this event. I'd like to turn things over now to my colleague, Dr. Tanya Smith-Jackson, our Senior Vice Provost and an esteemed professor and researcher herself with strong climate change and environmental justice interests. Dr. Smith-Jackson.
Right, thank you, Todd. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Earth Day celebration. I want to say happy Earth Day to everyone. Recall that our theme is environmental justice, equity, and sustainability, and Earth Day imperative. You know, I am the descendant of enslaved people in the United States. I am the daughter and granddaughter of farmers. My grandparents and my great-grandparents were sharecroppers, and my mother, who is 80, still runs a big farm and produces quite a bit of food for a lot of people, much of it that she is giving away at this point. But Earth Day is very important to us. I'm glad that we're going to have the panel discussion that's going to show many different perspectives, because having North Carolina A&T State University host this very important day has many implications. You know, we often think of land, and when we look back to 1970, which was the first celebration of Earth Day, you know, a lot of it was initially about Earth Day as commodity and looking at land as commodity. But when we bring in diverse perspectives, perspectives of people of color, perspectives of indigenous people, you know, understand that it's not just about the commodification of land. You know, economic growth and prosperity are important and are tied to land, so we must protect it. But when you start bringing in diverse perspectives, you'll start seeing that land is also about identity. The earth and being a part of the earth and engaging and connecting to the earth is identity, cosmology, spirituality. These things are much more powerful and make Earth Day even more important to many of us. So we should embrace it and make sure that we are involved in everything that we need to do around environmental justice and sustainability. I just want to make another remark about the beginning of Earth Day. It really did start as a bipartisan effort from a senator from Wisconsin and a congressman from California. So there was agreement in 1970 about the importance of Moderator, Tracy Lloyd McCurty. She is going to lead the way and make sure that all of you are able to hear these different perspectives, but also have our community engage in discussions and Q&A. Tracy Lloyd McCurty is the executive director of the Black Belt Justice Center, which is based in Washington, D.C. Tracy and Black Belt Justice are committed to addressing the root causes and dismantling the structural mechanisms that continue to dispossess African-American farmers and landowners of their wealth-creating asset, the land. She played a leading advocacy role in the inclusion of a $5 billion appropriation for Black farmers in the recently passed American Rescue Plan, a historic provision being called the most significant legislation for Black farmers since the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Her advocacy work continues on how the funding will be allocated to farmers. So I'm going to turn this over to Tracy McCurty, and we look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith-Jackson, for those warm words. Grand Rising, beloved community. Before I introduce our Earth Day panel, I want to acknowledge the thousands of Black farmers who transitioned to ancestorhood without receiving restorative land justice from the United States Department of Agriculture. As I was gathering my remarks this morning, I reflected on George Floyd's and his family's land story. George Floyd's great-great-grandfather, Hillary Thomas Stewart Sr., was born into slavery. During Reconstruction, he acquired over 500 acres of land in North Carolina. White farmers, through collusion and criminality, stole all 500 acres from him, stripping him of his economic independence. George Floyd's grandparents told as sharecroppers in North Carolina tobacco fields and were never able to climb out of the cycle of debt to acquire land again. This is the historical context to understand the legislative feat of the American Rescue Plan Act that provides $5 billion in debt cancellation and related services to Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, and farmers of color. Most folks are unaware of the historic Pickford v. Glickman class action racial discrimination lawsuit. This lawsuit was filed back in 1997. And in 1999, there was a consent decree. Our Black farmers organized tirelessly, and their demands were the return of land. They wanted full debt cancellation. They wanted to be compensated for their economic harm. And they also wanted federal and state taxes. What they received at the end of the lawsuit, the vast majority of the farmers, thousands of Black farmers, were left in unconscionable debt, threat of foreclosure, and no legal recourse to save their lands. We know that outright 7,000 Black farmers were denied recovery from the lawsuit. We joined our elder farmers 3 years ago when we learned that they were representing themselves pro se in federal court to delay foreclosure proceedings and to save their farms, and that USDA was offsetting their Social Security, disability, and subsidy payments to pay this debt. One of the farmers, Eddie Slaughter from Buena Vista, Georgia, he's 70 years old, double amputee, blind in one eye. USDA offset his Social Security, disability, and subsidy payment, his peanut subsidy payment, and it amounted to $41,000. And I think it's really important for us to grapple with, how could this happen? How could this historic class action racial discrimination lawsuit that was supposed to remedy Black farmers due to decades of institutional discrimination that was admitted by USDA, that it left the Black farmers in debt? I wanted to lift up, there's so many North Carolina light bearers I could lift up that have been instrumental to bringing us to this historic moment of running this victory lap with our farmers. But I wanted to lift up Gladys Todd. She is a legacy farmer from Zebulon, North Carolina. She testified back in 1997 at the historic Congressional Black Caucus hearing, where she stated and shared very passionately that her annual debt was $25,000, and $20,000 out of that $25,000 was interest. So I really think it's important to for a beloved community to understand how long our farmers have suffered under this debt. When we are preparing to leave for college, our elders tell us to go get that learning, but don't forget to bring it back home. And I carry this in my work. I am so full that we were able to bring this victory back home to our legacy farmers in the 1890s. Our panelists today represent the wise ones who carry this wisdom also in their works. I am deeply honored to moderate this panel, and it is my hope that it inspires us all to deepen our commitment to environmental justice, equity, and sustainability. Currently, Black farmers make up less than 2% of all farmers, and European Americans own 98% of the farmland. We know that under President Trump, upward of $46 billion in COVID relief and trade mitigation funds went to mostly white corporate farms, and only 0.1% of the COVID relief funds went to Black farmers. So we have much work to do. I am so excited to now transition and share with you the bios of the wise ones, our panelists for today. The flow of today's conversation, the panel, each panelist will speak for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we have some prepared questions for them. And then we really want to hear back from beloved community. So please submit your questions in the Q&A and we will get to you. Our first panelist, Dean Hill, is the Dean of the College of Agriculture, Environment, and Nutrition Sciences and Vice Provost for Academic Affairs, Land Grant, Community Engagement, and Integrative Sustainability Affairs at Tuskegee University. He is also director of the George Washington Carver Agricultural Experiment Station. Dr. Hill has been part of Tuskegee since 1977 and was named dean in 1987 and inducted into the USDA National Institute of Food and Agricultural Hall of Fame in 2016. He is the founder of the prestigious Carver Integrative Sustainability Center and 1890 Land Grant USDA Center of Excellence. Our next panelist is Dr. Deidra Hodges, Associate Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering at the University of Texas-El Paso. Dr. Hodges studies photovoltaics, solar and renewable energy, sustainability and radiation detectors. Dr. Hodges is also interested in the research, education, and development of a sustainability nexus through water treatment and sources, food security, and solar energy for improved socioeconomic status in desert climates. Dr. Hodges is also editor of Elsevier's Material Science and Semiconducting Processing, and is both a user and a visiting faculty at Brookhaven National Laboratory. So good to have you, Dr. Hodges. Next, we have Dr. Arnab Bhowmik, Assistant Professor of Soil Science and Soil Microbiology here at North Carolina A&T State University. Dr. Bhowmik research focuses on carbon and nitrogen cycling in agro ecosystems, soil health, and sustainable agriculture, soil management and greenhouse gas emissions, and also industrial hemp. Dr. Bhowmik has served as a junior research fellow with the Indian Council of Agricultural Research and a postdoctoral fellow at Pennsylvania State University, collaborating on USDA, NIFA, NEFA funded projects to study aspects of soil under adaptive management for climate change and soil health. Our next panelist is Kay Brandon, MSW, and also chair of the Solid Waste Management Commission for the city of Greensboro, North Carolina. She is a two-time graduate of Howard University. Brandon is a retired public health social worker and an instructor in the School of Social Work at UNC Chapel Hill and the Joint School of Social Work for North Carolina A&T State University and UNC Greensboro. As a community activist and organizer, she co-founded Citizens for Economic and Environmental Justice that successfully fought reopening of the environmentally problematic White Street landfill. Her work led to the creation of the Solid Waste Commission, which she has chaired since 2018. Lastly, we have Michael Carter Jr., a graduate of North Carolina A&T College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences. Carter is an 11th generation farmer and part of the 5th generation to run his family's Centennial Farm, Carter Farms, in the Piedmont region of Virginia. Carter Farm specializes in growing ethnic African tropical vegetables organically and has been a leader in diversification of traditional farm interests, branching out into specialty dinner events that serve as educational and culinary experiences, ecotourism, and manufacturing. Carter has a special interest in the history of Black farming in America, much of it illustrated by his family's own experience. At this time, we will hear remarks from Dean Hill.
Thank you very much. Honored and very appreciative for being here. Our time is short, so I'm going to plunge right in. I have 3 short stories to share. One on environmental justice, one on equity, and one on sustainability and regenerative agriculture. The environmental justice story is really fairly well known. We have about 40 landfills in Alabama. We are the dump for the nation. 33 states send their waste to areas in Alabama where the people are overwhelmingly, predominantly Black and poor, throughout the Black Belt and in certain areas around Birmingham. When you research this, you will be absolutely disgusted. Yes, people fought back, but the powers that be across the nation allowed this catastrophe to happen. And as you should suspect, the children, the elders, those communities are suffering from toxic leaks, gaseous emissions, and on and on and on. Alabama should be ashamed. One just set of information says that for compared to California, they have for 5 dumps, these types of dumps per million persons. In New York, 3 per million, but in Alabama, we have 35 per million, meaning millions of citizenry. So I'm trying to get across the density per person in Alabama. And we are going to fight this. At some point, there will be justice, but it's definitely a major environmental justice issue that has to be corrected. In one of the sites, there's 25,000 tons of waste brought in per day from New York, New Jersey. I just want to close on this issue by saying they tried to bring one to Macon County where Tuskegee is located, and they ran into a major problem. I want to say I'm proud of the students, faculty, staff. At that time in year 2000, we actually went to the books, got the data. All our faculty were activated with our students. We joined the community, and some of the old timers said, first time they saw Black and white work together on anything in Macon County, which is 85% Black. And we beat that one back. Let me move on. Equity. So let me start with 1890s. Right there, North Carolina A&T. You don't even get your match, your state match for your federal land grant funds. It is absolutely disgusting. I saw the data from North Carolina A&T yesterday. Same in Alabama. It's been since 1890, we should have been getting a one-to-one match, but the law came up in 2000 and said, do it over time. We're now 20 years later, and North Carolina A&T and Tuskegee University do not have a match equal to one-to-one. This is disgusting. What our students did was went back to 1890, did some calculations. Do you know how much they owe us for not having that one-to-one match for all these years? $1.8 billion. That's Tuskegee alone. Imagine what North Carolina A&T would get when they get their figures out. We're gonna get justice one day. These numbers are very, very real. I'll just take Auburn, for example. Today, they get 8-to-1 match. We don't even have our 1-to-1 match. And the state legislatures are making the gap bigger every year. There's a lot of justice to be had. I want to move on to my third issue because of one other point about equity, the opportunity zone. I understand around North Carolina A&T, you were unjustly dealt with around opportunity zone. I just want to say in Alabama, they put an opportunity zone around Auburn University, which is way advanced with money pouring in left and right. 30 miles away around Tuskegee, they didn't even allow one to occur. We fought it. They said it's too late. They put them near Auburn, near Montgomery, but nothing around the city, around the university. And we're still fighting that. We fought it, but you see how the injustice continues? It's like they want us not to be successful and to prosper. And we've got to fight that. So my third issue, I'm gonna go to sustainability and regenerative agriculture. I want to give an opportunity because Tracy pointed out there's $5 billion for debt relief and $1 billion for moving our farmers forward. Here's an opportunity, world. The 1890s have already organized. We have centers of excellence, and one of them is called the Center for Food Systems, Rural Prosperity, and Economic Sustainability. All of the 1890s are part of that. North Carolina A&T plays a critical role. Kathleen Liang, Shirley Parker, Alton Thompson, Albert Essel, Muhammad, they're all engaged in this, but every 1890 is. So here's the suggestion. Let's take $20 million per year for 5 years. Give that to that Center of Excellence, which is already organized, and let that focus be on converting those African-American, socially disadvantaged, and other farmers in our states who want to transition to organic farming or expand their organic farming operations. Of course, capital access, there's a lot that goes into that, but let the 1890s lead that. We're organized, we're ready, we have our team set, we're ready to deal with animals, crops, the land, the soil. By doing that, we will be directly affecting gaseous emissions by converting to a farming type, a system that puts carbon dioxide, methane into the soil in a natural and healthy way and actually removes carbon dioxide, methane, etc. from the atmosphere, which is killing us. With this project, you will get multiple returns: economic development, rural prosperity. Young people get to see all this. You get healthy food. You got Black farmers making money. You have your HBCU using all their skill sets across the university to make it happen. Let's do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean Hill. At this time, we will hear from Dr. Hodges.
Thank you, everyone. Clean and renewable energy, and specifically from my area, solar energy is considered the crop of the 21st century. I was astounded to learn that Black farms have decreased from 14% to less than 2% due to injustice and discrimination and systemic racism. It continues. Right now, Black farms, solar or PV installations are happening on farms and in rural areas. And the injustice that's taking place with Black farms is that they their land is being leased at a lower rate than white farmers. So it's another injustice that's taking place in this era. Also climate change. Also the large farm corporations, Black farms having to compete against these large corporations that are buying up a lot of land in a lot of rural areas, making it more difficult for Black farms to compete. And one example I like to give is this big corporation Land O'Lakes, where they're using a lot of technology and a lot of systems and a lot of technology. So, you know, how do Black farms compete against this? This is still part of the injustice that I perceive. So I would like to say, with this crop of the 21st century to Black farmers, I would propose 3 things to support justice. The first is that that Black farmers not lease out their lands to these outsiders, that Black farmers install the solar systems themselves, and that Black farmers, that we institute federal incentives like we do for the general population right now, which that advantage is going to the majority of the population. I say that we offer federal incentives to Black farmers to install solar installations on their non-productive land themselves and not lease it out and not be taken advantage of. I also say that we should have power purchase agreements so that when Black farmers, should they choose to install solar PV on their lands, what could happen is that that power be bought at a lower rate. So I suggest that we have federal laws that say the rates at which that power is purchased from Black farms is market rate, you know, an area that injustice cannot occur if we institute a federal law. A third thing that I would like to say is that in the business arena, like in corporations with contracts, we have the government, their set aside contracts for minority businesses. I also say we should have set aside contracts for Black farms and their produce to guarantee them a customer to sell to, so it levels the playing field when they're competing against these big conglomerate farmers. So to help justice, environmental justice with Black farmers.
Thank you, Dr. Hodges.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
We were providing support to 5-generation sugarcane farmers in Alberia Parish, and they're looking to transition. They're Pickford farmers. Their debt started out at $500,000 and now it's at $1.5 million. And they want to transition their farm to create solar energy. So your remarks were right on point. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, thank you.
At this time, we will hear from Dr. Bhowmik.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm trained as a soil scientist, so maybe I should start talking about how soil is fundamental for the existence of all life on this planet, and how small-scale underrepresented farmers, to whom we actually cater to here at A&T, play such a crucial role in soil health. So as we all know, soils are crucial for maintaining the critical balance between food security and environmental sustainability. Soil provides an affordable and feasible solution to achieve net zero and combat climate change by acting as a sink for greenhouse gases. And Dr. Hill mentioned that. For example, photosynthesizing plants, they capture the carbon dioxide, right, to make their own bodies. And then this carbon can actually be stored in the soil for long term. And in this process of adding carbon to the soil, we are doing 2 things. We are not only offsetting the greenhouse gas emissions, but also we are providing and improving the soil health and soil fertility. So that's a win-win situation for all of us. So therefore, a healthy soil will produce healthy plants, which will give rise to healthy animals, healthy humans, and therefore, healthy air and water. So overall, a healthy planet. So we shouldn't be too much comfortable because, we have to be careful about how we treat soils, and we need to stop right now treating our soils as dirt, because it could turn into a major source of greenhouse gas. So in this process, we could actually lose the carbon which is stored in the soil, and it could turn, infertile or unhealthy. And we have seen that, areas that have unhealthy or infertile soils correspond very well to areas with food deserts and poor socioeconomic conditions for the farmers. So as an example, here in the southeastern United States, for example, in North Carolina, we have lost almost the top fertile layer of the soils. And therefore, the carbon, all the rich nutrients stored in it got lost. I mean, this is a critical problem, but we have some potential solutions for that. So here in the College of Ag and Environmental Sciences at North Carolina A&T, we have a tripartite mission of teaching, research, and extension. And then, one of our major goals is to assist and address the needs of small-scale farmers. Now, small-scale farmers have a very, very important role to play in food production. And therefore, they are very intimately linked with this concept of soil health and environmental sustainability. So interestingly, small-scale farmers have huge potential to be natural, stewards of the land. So, for example, when you think about use of hand labor other than machinery, actually helps the small farming systems to have higher crop diversity, and this also minimizes financial risks because you're growing more than one crops, right? And also, small-scale farmers have limited resources, and therefore they tend to depend more on the natural and the ecological processes of nature. However, there are some serious and key challenges that are faced by small-scale farmers that need to be addressed. So, there are various types of constraints that they face. So financial constraint, labor constraint, input constraints. You need to have the agriculture input to make the production, right? Sometimes, behavioral and knowledge constraints. So all these constraints actually need to be addressed in order to enforce and help the small-scale underrepresented farmers. And I'll just stop there, and I'll say, I look forward to hearing more from all of you regarding environmental justice, equity, and sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhowmik. At this time, we will hear from Kay Brandon. Ms. Brandon, I think you're on mute.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here, I believe, because of the Solid Waste Commission that I chair here in Greensboro, but really for the larger story of how the commission came to be. I live in East Greensboro, where North Carolina A&T is located. And in the larger community, we have a section known as Mount Zion that dates back to the 1860s. The White Street landfill opened in the 1940s. The land for the landfill was either sold or given to the city by a Black family that lived in the area. In the mid-1990s, a group called Concerned Citizens for Northeast Greensboro was formed because a Winn-Dixie closed and there was no grocery store in the area after that. And they began to deal with other things. One of the things was to work on closing the landfill. The landfill was closed in 2006. From the mid-1990s, 2006, it took to the first time. But in 2009, a city council member suggested that the landfill reopen in order to save the city money. And that's the point that me and others came in to form a group called Citizens for Economic and Environmental Justice. The group was led by Dr. Goldie Wells, who is a former city council member, and she's currently back on city council. Me and a group of others who decided that we needed to form our own group to deal specifically with the landfill closure. We organized and we began meeting in a church. We realized early on that we needed some legal representation. And we were fortunate enough to be able to get the Southern Coalition for Social Justice to represent us and work with us. We strategized, trying to get publicity out. We went door to door in the immediate area, but we also used the newspaper. We were fortunate enough to get a newspaper reporter who was very sympathetic to our cause and wrote a lot of stories. And this caused the larger Greensboro area to become aware of what was going on. And it really helped us to gain some support. From 2009 to 2011, we worked on this, and we went to city council every time it met. One of our strategies was to have at least 3 people speak at each city council. And when we went, we were always at the last on the agenda. And sometimes the meetings were lasted until midnight, but we stayed and persevered. In June of 2011, the lawyer from the Southern Coalition for Social Justice was able to win a restraining order for us to get the landfill, keep the landfill closed. And we, and that's like 2 weeks later, we were able to get the restraining order. The first was a temporary. At that time, the attorney told us that we had won one fight, but what we needed to do was really to change the council because this issue was going to come up again. And at that point, we formed another group called Greensboro Voter Alliance, and we began to work in getting people out to vote to support candidates who were supportive of closing the landfill. And with that, we were successful in gaining 3 council seats, or changing 3 council seats, the mayor and 2 other council members who were sympathetic to keeping the landfill closed. As a result of that, we asked the community group, Citizens for Economic and Environmental Justice, we asked the city to form a task force, solid waste task force. And that led to the Solid Waste Commission. And with that, some of the things that we were able to do, the methane gas from the landfill is now converted and being sold for electricity. And we have just recently installed solar panels, 15 acres of solar panels at the landfill. And this has been done in an attempt to repurpose the landfill, if you might say, so that it cannot expand. There's an agreement not to expand it, but we think if something is there, then that prevents it from being expanded. The Solid Waste Commission is made up of 9 members, all represented by each city council person. And we have been able to, we are an advisory group. We don't really make policy, but we're an advisory group. And so we have helped the city to really look at some different ways to recycle and to use waste. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Brandon. At this time, we'll hear from Michael Carter Jr.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to first acknowledge and honor the ancestors, the elders, the greater entities and powers known and unknown whose shoulders, energies, and efforts we stand upon today to celebrate another day on this glorious earth, this Earth Day. It's a pleasure to be with my alma mater, North Carolina A&T State University, Aggie Pride, to acknowledge and celebrate Earth Day today. I've been steeped in agriculture since birth as the son of an agriculture teacher. I spent a number of years after my time at A&T learning about agriculture and other cultures. I studied ag Greek in Israel, Kenya, Benin, and 5 years in Ghana, West Africa. Environmental agriculture practices like drip irrigation, using plant-based pests and fungus deterrents like neem oil, custard apple or graviola seeds, neem leaves, garlic, and cayenne pepper to prevent pests, the use of mounds and raised beds to create food, the benefits of human labor over mechanized labor on soil and soil compaction, swidden or slash and burn agriculture techniques, among other environmentally sustainable practices. Environmental justice truly cannot happen until there's justice in our environments. We need to see a climate change in agriculture. In the state of Virginia, we went from 50,000 Black farmers in 1925 down to 1,332 Black farmers in 2017. That's a 98% decline in the absolute wrong direction. Black farmers in Virginia and throughout the U.S. are a highly endangered species. And the best way to shift this is to buy from Black farmers. This is indeed our time to put our money where our farmers are. Put our money where we say our mouth is. This moment should be a reminder of our history with Black farmers and Black farms. If we can just recollect back to those times, our greatest landholding period and our greatest number of Black farmers happened during a time when we had no support from USDA, no government support, and no support from outside communities. So this should inspire us to really understand the power of our communities and the power of our dollars. As my favorite professor at A&T, Dr. Granger, would say, we have to utilize our dollar votes. We have to put our dollar to work with our Black farmers. We cannot have boycotting of Black farmers by Black communities any longer. This is going to lead to the extinction of the Black farmers. We need our consumers, we need our people, we need our communities to support us in whatever way they can financially by buying our produce and giving us the support that we need. How we treat the earth is relative to how we treat one another. Our spirituality and our very nature are at its core. At its core, it needs to be centered in truth, integrity, and love for future generations. Nothing we do now should take away from the rights and health of our future generations. My grandchildren will be the 7th generation to benefit from my great-great-grandparents, Jefferson and Catherine Shirley's decision to purchase our family homestead for $722.05 on November 5th, 1910. Let us continue to make the same impactful decisions that our elders did to ensure we have a place to call home. We have a sacred responsibility to the next 7 generations. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Wow. At this time, we're going to transition to the pre-prepared questions. I think we're going to allocate maybe 15 minutes for the pre-prepared questions, maybe a little more, but we wanted to make sure that we left sufficient time for the questions from beloved community. So the first question is, and any of the panelists can answer these questions, and I would love for it to be a robust dialogue amongst the panelists. How can small farmers build on their local roots in communities to contribute to the resilience of local food systems and environmental sustainability?
I'll start by just saying working together, which is people assume that's going to be easy to form cooperatives and clusters. We've worked at it across 1890 land grants and have had some success. We need to work harder at it and smarter. I am very optimistic about the young generation who want to be farmers. They're bringing whole sets of skills and ways of working together in spirituality that's going to really mean a lot for the future.
Thank you, Daniel. Did anybody else want to address that question? Okay, we'll go to another question. The $5 billion appropriation for Black farmers is a major historic milestone. As we know, Black farmers did not receive much from the Homestead Acts. The Southern Homestead Act 46 million acres were transferred to mostly white male settlers, and less than 1,000 land certificates went to Black farmers and families. Of course, we know that 46 million acres was stolen from indigenous nations. What is the most important thing you hope will be accomplished with this funding? This is particularly the 1 billion, and what must happen next for this not to be simply one-off provision, but the down payment on future significant funding? Dean Hill,
you're muted there.
All right. Yeah, I had to jump. Look, down payment was the key. 1 billion, and that's going to be for everybody. That's just not for Black farmers now. And based on the history, by the time the way the government ends up different distributing and what have you, we always end up getting the crumbs. I've seen it for 42 years. So let's say down payment, that's a beginning. We have to get a significant piece of that. But the other thing, I'm just close on this. I've also seen some individual farmers, Black and white, trying to get half of that for themselves. So there are models that are being presented to USDA, and I can't wait to see how USDA responds. We've got to be unified. That's why I say, give it to the 1890s. We already organized. It cuts across all the states. Don't start a new organization when we're already here ready to go. I'll stop.
Yeah, I do have a follow-up question with you, Dean Hill, with respect to the 1 billion. Do you support part of the allocation going to some of the Pigford legacy farmers who were denied compensation? There is a provision regarding the 1 billion that provides financial compensation and grant making and land acquisition to the Pigford legacy farmers. Because as you said, we all know the 1 billion is a crumb. The Pigford lawsuit was 1 billion, and only 4.8% went to debt cancellation. And then we know that the 50,000 was cash payment was based on the payments to the Tuskegee experiment survivors, which was 37,500. And class counsel disregarded the advice of Dr. Donald McDowell here at North Carolina A&T, who stated that Black farmers needed at least 250,000 to re-enter the agricultural industry. Can you speak a little bit about that too, with respect to equity for the Pigford farmers?
So you have hit all the points. I'll just say this. Let's don't get so excited because the term is 1 billion. We need way more in reparations to deal with that. And so, yes, let me just say yes for the Pigford. Yes, yes, yes. So let that be set aside and move forward with that. But right on the heels of that, you have all these other new persons who are not a part of that, who are out there, and the young and the new and the whatever, and they need an opportunity. So it's like Du Bois. Look at the world from two sets of eyes. Well, we need to look at the world from multiple perspectives. Let's don't get the okie doke. We're going to give you a crumb and you go crawl in your hole. No, we're going to be look at it from 8, 10, 12, infinite number of angles to get the optimum for it. Like the brother Michael, he has a whole approach to farming. Arnab talked about another. We have the Black growers who are big growers. We are a multi-dimensional farming community, and we need resources to support all aspects of that, as well as the whole food chain and system. So please let me stop and don't ask me again, because I'll keep talking. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Hill. Is there anyone else that wants to?
Yeah, Tracy, this is Michael. I'd like to comment on that.
Okay.
And I think, I'm in agreement with Dean Hill, but also, historically, agriculture is a highly subsidized industry, which means we get a lot of welfare. And over this past 2 years, there's been about $45 billion that's been given directly to farmers via unfair trade practices with China and then COVID relief packages that have happened. And all of that went into the accounts of farmers. None of that went to any universities, any nonprofits. All of it went into the pockets, the bank accounts of these farmers. And that's the same thing. I think a lot of this money needs to go into the bank accounts of our farmers. Not all of it, but a substantial portion should go into the bank accounts of those farmers to help us reinvest to our infrastructure, expand our businesses, and show younger people that farming can be successful. That generally is what turns people off to agriculture, is that they never really see how you make money. You see men with overalls covered in soil, dirty, work tirelessly, and then, they come home and say, we ain't make no money. No one wants to be involved in any type of industry that doesn't make any money. That's why we go to school. That's why we go to college, university, to figure out how to make money for ourselves. Agriculture is one of those industries that if you own land, you have money. As you would say, you're dirt rich. A lot of us are dirt rich, and we don't know it. And we need to be better educated on what we can do with our land, how we can support our farmers. I saw the question there as well about how do you support Black farmers? How do you know if you're supporting a Black farmer? At this point in time, for you to know and understand that, you really have to build a relationship with Black farmers, either through farmers markets, through visiting farmers, through going through various databases online with lists of Black farmers in your area. If you go to the grocery store, it's very tough to tell if you're dealing with a Black farmer or not. For most grocery stores and larger retailers, farmers need to be GAP certified, which means good agricultural practices. In Virginia alone, out of the 57 GAP certified growers, only 3 in Virginia are Black. And, so the chances of actually supporting a Black farmer in Virginia at a grocery store is slim to almost none. So we had to kind of change up our buying practices a lot to support our farmers. And that's what I would love to see with this initiative. A very similar campaign to Black Lives Matter. Black farmers need to matter. We need to support our Black farmers with our dollars, go out of our way to find them, to locate them, and to support them.
Thank you, Michael. Is there anyone else, any of the other panelists that want to address that question? Dr. Hodges?
Yes. And I also agree with all of the comments. And I think, we should go further with legislation and make it federal laws that provide the support for Black farmers, federal laws that provide purchasing contracts to Black farmers for their produce, for their agriculture, that it is a law, so that it's not hard, so that it's not a hard thing. That market is there for Black farmers as a federal law. For Black farmers, if they're doing photovoltaics or wind on their land, it is a law that the support is there for them, that they're not, being taken advantage of where people are leasing the land at low rates. So I think if we take it from the federal perspective and make, these initiatives laws, in addition to the funding and additional funding, more than what's on the table now, I think we should also look at federal laws.
Thank you.
If I could chime in and give it that, I love that point. And I think because we're dealing with HBCUs right now, we have to ask the question, how many HBCUs actually support Black farmers? A lot of them have very large contracts with Aramark, with Cisco, and other large distributors of food who don't support Black farmers. I think a lot, some of this money should go into a special fund of some sort where our HBCUs, our 1890s, can purchase for their cafeterias, for their dining halls from Black farmers. If it's nothing less, just through the summer. That's an excellent point.
Okay, we will proceed to another question. Climate change is one of the most serious and global existential threats that we are facing in this country. The agriculture sector has a critical role to play in addressing this threat, since it can both contribute to or mitigate climate change. What actions as land stewards should we take now so that we can regenerate and heal our planet?
I can try answering that. So I would like to start by saying, that we are at a point where we not only should look into reducing greenhouse gases, but at the same time drawing down the existing greenhouse gases that we have. And and research has proven that, there are certain, we call it climate adaptive management practices. So for example, reducing the disturbance in the soil. So promoting reduced tillage, or having different crops in your crop rotation, so diversifying your systems, using cover crops, covering your soil throughout the season. I mean, those are the things that we could do, we could employ in order to help combat climate change. And I think I need to put this point that there is a cost associated with sustainability, and as consumers, I think we need to be ready to pay that cost. So for example, if we want to support such food systems, maybe we could go out to a farmer's market to get this stuff rather than going to a grocery store. And at the same time, there should also be some, I think, implications with regards to policy, because, for example, there should be some kind of incentives provided to farmers if they switch, from their current management practice to maybe, a climate adaptive management practice. And, sometimes those, there was a thing called, there is a thing actually, carbon credits, where you actually provide some incentives if there is if you have lower carbon footprints. But again, there are some kind of difficulties in measuring that and tracking that. So I think it has to come from different parts of the system in order to support these small scale farming systems at the same time for the sustainability aspect of it.
I'd like to add, the impacts of climate change are severe, and we're seeing them with increased temperatures. So from a holistic approach, we have to employ sustainable solutions in our farming and everywhere. We're seeing drier climates, which, it's not just impacting agriculture, but there's food, there's water, and there's energy at that food, energy, water nexus. So we're seeing large populations move across the world because of lack of water. What about populations in extreme environments and deserts? And then urban populations in food deserts. There's a big impact as a result of climate change due to all of our CO2 emissions. So we saw at the start of COVID-19, when people were not driving, planes were not, we didn't have all of this air traffic, there was a significant reduction in CO2 emissions. We saw a lot of stories where there was a reversal. We saw the climate begin to heal itself. So it is, it's possible. We're not at that irreversible stage. If we can minimize CO2 emissions, if we can do things sustainable, the climate can heal itself, but it's going to take everyone doing their part. But right now, we have this increased heating and populations moving. How can we grow? Water, limited water resources. This is a whole nother, and then the energy it takes to do this, to grow the food. So it's a big issue. I'm organizing a workshop right now for the National Science Foundation to address sustainability and food security. They're bringing all of the stakeholders to the table, from government, industry, academia, nonprofits, to come up with a solution to address food insecurity because of this. So it is a big challenge, and it's going to take all of the stakeholders coming to the table, but it certainly is reversible right now. We saw it as a result of COVID-19, but it impacts water, energy, food and agriculture. But what do we do? And that's the question, right now on the table.
So I jump in on this because this big story, this conversation on the environment, etc. And then when the money flows and the big conferences are made, your HBCUs are left out. We who are on the ground with those farmers in Louisiana, Michael, and those who are working, what I'm really trying to say at the federal level, and Tracy, when you go back to Washington and fight for us, move that money to where we who are on the ground with our farmers, and then give us enough money. Don't give us crumbs like you, give us enough where we can actually help Michael get something. It doesn't have to go through FSA, USDA FSA, and those filters that end up slowing them down and messing them up. The government gets in the way of our small socially disadvantaged farmers. They harm them. Let us work with them and get them the resources quickly, get the scientists and engineers and technologists and social scientists who are right there at our university, working with them on the ground, get our students with them, and let's make some progress. Look, I dare you, United States of America, finally give 1890 HBCUs a chance to work with our small farmers, and we'll get those CO2 emissions back into the soil.
Thank you, Dean Hill. The next question, it appears that the only hope to salvage and advance environmental justice, equity, and sustainability may be transformative local leadership. Can local leaders develop or regain and retain their moral and ethical moorings during America's era of rampant environmental injustice, inequity, and sustainability? Can we hear from Kay Brandon on that question?
Yes, I would like to address that question. I think local leadership is very important. When our group began, some in the community, I won't say many, but some in the community said that we could not be successful in fighting the city. And those of us who maybe grew up in the 60s knew that some things could be accomplished if we were persistent. And that's what we did. We developed a plan. You have to do it from the grassroots, because I think one of the things that we were able to accomplish is that we brought in people not just from our community. You have to have allies from the whole community, from the whole city. I'm sorry. And I think you have to have a plan. You have to be very persistent. That was one of the things, because once we got on our mission, we said that we would not be deterred. We would, with the tricks that they pulled at city council, we said, we don't care if we have to stay here all night, we're going to do it. And I think you serve as a model for younger members in your community to join and participate, because that's what we did. We had all ages in our Citizens for Economic and Environmental Justice group. We had young people, we had older people such as myself, and we felt like we needed that in order to come to some kind of resolution. I want to add one thing I forgot with all of the talk about farming. One of the things that our group was able to do was to get the city council to agree to renovate a shopping center that was in our area, the one where the Winn-Dixie had been located. And we actually opened a co-op grocery store, which was a major accomplishment. However, we learned that it takes a lot to sustain that. And so we were not able to keep it open. It stayed open about 2 years. And we did use some local farmers to supply that grocery store. Thank you.
Thank you. I was actually a member of the Renaissance Community Grocery Store. I paid my dues from DC. So we continue to dream and implement our dreams. At this time, we are going to transition to questions from beloved community, and you can put them in the chat box. The first question we have here is, I work in cooperative extension at Penn State. We have very few Black farmers in rural Pennsylvania, and I was wondering if there are any initiatives to establish Black farming communities in rural areas in states like ours. I think it could be a great opportunity for African-American youth. Is there anybody that wants to answer that question?
I'll look to.
Oh, go ahead.
Right here.
No, you go ahead.
There are initiatives. There are farms I know in Pennsylvania or outside of Philadelphia that are looking to do just what you're talking about. One thing we had to keep in mind and consider is that, you know, during the Great Migration, we fled to a lot of these cities, and we've gotten comfortable in these places. And, you know, home is home. and it's become our home. And there has to be a kind of a reverse migration back into those rural areas. Because when we start understanding the political landscape, we understand that land is power. You know, that's why you have a place like Wyoming, who has the same amount of electoral votes as Washington, D.C., who has, you know, Washington, D.C. probably has more people than Wyoming, but Wyoming has more land. And those few landowners had just as much political power as, you know, the metropolis of the District of Columbia. And when you look at those type of scenarios, you can see the value and the benefit of the land. Our elders coming fresh out of the enslavement period, the first thing they desired to do was to purchase land and to buy land. And we need to make sure we're teaching our children the importance and the value of land. There's not going to be any more made. The $722 that my great-great-grandparents invested is probably worth closer to $2 to $3 million now. And there will be no other investment to ever make that would go up in value like that. So employing with our young people, and sometimes, you know, with PSU, I love your website. You have to take the initiative and work with smaller NGOs who are looking to bring more younger farmers out, because we're left behind. We're left behind a lot of times in 4-H. We're left behind a lot in FFA because the culture just is not conducive to young Black people. We don't find it engaging to have to do a competition with guys with Confederate flags on their hats or on their belt buckles. So a lot of us, I mean, I'll speak to my own experiences. I stopped participating as soon as I could. So my father let me stop because it just wasn't a comfortable environment, and it hasn't changed too much since those times. So I would, you know, we'd love to have a conversation offline as well to talk about what type of initiatives we could do to bring more young people to those areas.
I was going to add that over the years, I've seen partnerships between 1890, 1862, and other universities work very well, whether they be from California, Pennsylvania, what have you. There's a human nature, there's a connection among human beings of goodwill who want to do exchanges. So, for example, that person who spoke out from Pennsylvania, I'm assuming the heart is great. So there are others in cooperative extension there and across other land grants. Let's hook up together, because we can do student exchanges. You all who have expertise in certain organic practices and fruits, etc., can come down, and you will be so well received by the Black farmers, by the Black communities, by the brown communities. So let's get this exchange going on from a human point of view.
Okay. All right, the next question that we have is from Brianna Farber, AAAS Science and Technology, Policy Fellow at the Department of Energy. Her question to all the panelists, but perhaps especially to Dr. Bhowmik: what can the R&D community, federal and academia do to support environmental justice, especially for Black farmers and other disenfranchised farmers and landowners?
First thing would be provide more research dollars for us, you know, so that we can address the real life problems that, you know, some of these underrepresented farmers, Black farmers, are facing. And yeah, I think that not only, you know, it's not only limited to research, but also teaching, you know, training our next generation students, the young, you know, scientists, and also, you know, to the farmers itself. So, you know, talking again about the teaching, research, and extension model, where, you know, we are actually going out to the farmers. So here in our college, we have small farm field days, small farm weeks, where, you know, we have a lot of these farmers come and we demonstrate, you know, some of the tools. I'll give an example from one of my projects on industrial hemp, which is really popular with some of these farmers, and they are really excited to you know, look at this new crop, emerging crop, this high value crop. And so I think it needs to be integrated and weaved into the teaching, research, extension model, and definitely, you know, provide, you know, getting greater support will have more inclusiveness. We can build more inclusiveness into it.
Was there anyone else that wanted to answer that question?
Yeah, I'd just like to piggyback what the doctor was saying. I think hemp is one of those plants that has a lot of potential research tied to it in terms of hempcrete, hemp plastics, and there's a strong component for younger people to deal with and plant and grow and maintain hemp. So I think you almost feed two birds with one piece of bread by utilizing hemp as a source of research, but also as a source of, for lack of a better term, a gateway plant to agriculture for our younger people. That can also help to sustain air property. A lot of times air property goes away because the elders don't see young people showing any interest in the land. And if you put that mix together of hemp, technology, research and development, and then industry to go along with it to provide markets for these young people as they desire to fulfill that need, we can see some very good things, very great things happening. But we definitely need to get more young people involved with our air property, with our land holdings. And I think hemp is one of those plants that is very suited to do that. It gains and grabs the imagination of so many young people. And when I'm saying young people, I'm saying people under 50.
And I'd like to add to that, we actually have seen a lot of interest among our students, our young students, to actually learn, come out to the field, see what we are doing, how to grow it. So, but yeah, I think, that's a very important point in order to target the young people and see what actually interests them.
The next question that we have from beloved community: how can we, people of the public, assist in fighting for this equity for our HBCUs? How can we organize to be of assistance? So I think this is speaking to the inequity that Dean Hill discussed in his opening remarks. I do want to, I know I'm the moderator, but I do want to jump in here. President Biden is looking at how to use the Commodity Credit Corporation funds. From what I understand, it's a limitless pot of money. This is the same pot that President Trump tapped into to provide support to mostly, white corporate farms. Currently, President Biden is looking at how this money could be used to pay farmers to sequester carbon. There was a press release that just came out now with respect to a piece of legislation that's dealing with this exact issue that was announced by Senator Stabenow. I think that we need to look at the Commodity Credit Corporation. These funds, it doesn't go through Congress, of how we can provide equity to Black farmers. I did speak to a USDA official about this pot of money, and the response was, well, Black farmers comprise 2%, so you could get 2%. That's not going to work. That's not equity. So we have to be unified, and we have to continue to push. That's really kind of was our strategy with getting the $5 billion allocated through budget reconciliation. We initially tried to hop the train with the Justice for Black Farmers Act, but realized we needed 10 votes from the Republicans. And we said, let's try to find another way around. Grandma said, always be Brer Rabbit. We had to find another way. And so the other way was budget reconciliation. And if you recall that vote, it's simple majority, but it was very close. It was 50-49. And so we really need, those votes to move forward an agenda to provide restorative land justice to Black farmers. But I did want to put that out there for us to really look at the Commodity Credit Corporation Fund. It's 30 billion, but it could be more. And so I think that we need to have a strong agenda to say, we don't just want to pay farmers to sequester carbon. Black farmers, indigenous farmers we've been doing these practices, right? We want the money to be allocated, and we want to stand in our own imagination about how that should be utilized. So I just wanted to put that there. But if does anybody else want to make a comment on that?
I'd like to comment, and I agree that we should organize. We have to organize. And I wanted to ask about that Justice for Black Farmers Act of 2020. So I don't know when that, I know it went to, it said the Committee on Finance, November 30th, the timing, 2020. So now with Biden's administration, you know, what's the status of that? Can we bring it back? Can we amend to that?
So it was reintroduced late January, I believe January 30th. Again, we need 10 Republican, but we need 60 votes. And so some of the farmers believe, you know, that we can organize and that we can get those 10 votes. Again, if you study Pickford history, the lawsuit wasn't going to move forward until the farmers organized to move back the statute of limitations, and they needed Newt Gingrich to do that. So it can be done. The other avenue is to kind of split it up and then wait 2 years to put it in the farm bill, which to me is not going to really address the heart of the inequity. So I think this is the work. And I know that when we first started out with the Black Farmers Appeal Cancel Pickford Debt campaign, a lot of folks were like, you think you're gonna get that debt canceled? You really think you'll, after 20 years, you think? But we were able to do it. So I think that it really speaks to us tapping into a collective spirit, a determined spirit, and to be very cunning with how we move forward with the appropriations, because there's a whole lot of money that moves through and we need to make the demand. We have not made the demand. And I think now we're empowered to do so. Okay, we have another question from a beloved community. Just to be mindful of time, we have 10 more minutes, but let's try to answer as many questions as we can. In relation to the lack of equal funding that the federal government was supposed to give HBCUs, specifically land grant institutions, how do we fight the government so that our institutions receive their proper funding? I don't know if that's similar to the other question, or I think this is really speaking to organizing. So we have, I think, close to 500 community members signed up for this gathering, this brain trust. How can we marshal that energy to support an agenda that supports the regeneration of the Black agricultural land base?
I'll just say one thing. When we fought to get the data out there so that everyone could see the disparity, USDA pulled a trick on us, and what they did was there's a 1-to-1 match. And so the table that came out that was supposed to be reported to Congress showed only the minimum to make the match that say North Carolina A&T gets. So when they report, they only show the exact 1-to-1 match, whereas the state may be giving them 10, 12, 20 to 1. So in a way, a government let us down, because North Carolina A&T, the table it uses to educate Congress of the disparity was put in a manner that didn't advantage them. So you're right. We can no longer just try to work within the agency. That doesn't work. We have to get a movement that pushes past the tables and brings it to the forefront. Because like our students did, they got those numbers and showed that 1.8 billion, that 1.8 billion gap is increasing. You know, there's no attempt to bring reconciliation or fairness or unity. So the movement, we've got to get our 1890, our land grants, our HBCUs, our community-based organization, our churches, everybody's got to join together, and we got to fight for this.
Indeed. Okay. The next question is from Paul Hardy. I'm an A&T alumnus. Is there a concern about so many acres of land being converted to solar farms and not available for crop production?
Yes.
Dr. Hodges, could you? Okay.
Yes, that is an issue in this rush right now to install solar. There's a big, and to meet the goals right now, to have so much renewable energy by 2030. So there is a rush to go out and by developers and by investors, and they're looking for land. And the way that they make their profit is on cheap land. So they run to look for cheap land, and they take the incentives and they're installing solar in rural areas. And that's the other injustice that I opened up with mine. They're taking advantage of Black farmers. So for solar, you need a lot of land. And so they're using agricultural land. Right now, there's no policy. The land that should be used is non-productive land. So some productive land is being used. What are the policies? And that is an issue, if we're going to use productive land and take away from, food production. So, several issues there. One is that injustice, running to rural areas, offering Black farmers very little money compared to others for the lease of their land. And again, I say to Black farmers, do not lease out your land, be your own developers, use that as a crop, sell energy back to the government at a fair market rate. Do not be discriminated at the rate at which they purchase your power. But only use your productive land. Use your other land to still grow your agriculture. Don't wait for the government to say, okay, this is a policy, only non-productive land can be used. And then what's the definition of non-productive land? So yes, that is an issue in this rush right now to install solar all over land. And the key for that to be profitable is cheap land, and where are they running for cheap land? So that is an issue, but I say that we don't wait for policy and we don't wait for government, that we stand up and recognize what needs to be done, and we're proactive.
And I think that goes well with, the land capability classification, which means that, we need to use the land what is best suitable for. So all lands might not be, suitable for growing crops. Some might be for grazeland, some might be forests, some might be what Dr. Hodges was talking about. So that ties in very well.
Okay. We have another question. How do you envision HBCUs contributing towards a broadened availability of electric vehicles to assist in reducing our carbon footprint?
Okay, I like to address this. So right now in this clean energy market with electric vehicles and batteries and solar, a lot of jobs are being created, maybe 500,000 jobs. And right now, another injustice. 75% of those jobs do not look like the population of our country. 75% of those jobs are going to the majority. So that's another injustice. How do we, again, we're going to have to organize and come together to be a part of what's happening, because it's already happening. Renewable energy, electric vehicles, big battery manufacturing facilities are going up. Who's getting those jobs? Wind turbines are being installed right now. Who's on a major scale? We're talking a lot of money. Who's getting those jobs? And are we involved in that research? Where are those dollars going through? And, we should be proactive now. There should be workforce development, broadening participation that's being required to be a part of all of this funding that's happening right now. And again, we are not at that table. So, and it's happening.
Okay. Our next question is from Ebony Gator, North Carolina A&T class of 98, chemical engineering graduate. How can I help in my own way to make a difference in my day-to-day living?
I can give it a shot. So when I think about it, I think of, modifying my lifestyle. What kind of food systems am I supporting? What kind of footprints I'm leaving? Am I actually promoting, adopting a plant, for example? So I think it needs to start with the individual and then, move outward.
I would just like to add that one of the things that we have really promoted with our Solid Waste Commission is recycling, and really trying to get the community into that. understanding how to recycle. And we've had some successes with that, but there still needs to be a lot more effort given to that.
Yeah. And I would like to say just we've got to consume less. We've got to spend more and consume less. As Dr. Hodges was saying, there was COVID put us in a predicament of sorts, but the environment was blessed by it. And I think because of human activity, we consume way too much of unnecessary things that really pollute the environment. So I think maybe 50 to 60% of the food we consume goes to waste in society. So there's a lot of things we can do personally in terms of our dietary and spending habits. And a lot of those things is buying local, again, buying from Black farmers, but also buying less. Buying exactly what you need as opposed to getting something for later. But if we consume less, we're going to see a greater impact on the environment.
We are actually at time. We want to be mindful of everyone's time. And so I don't know if we want to close with one question. I don't know how the panelists feel. I think we need to be mindful of time. A copy of the recording will be provided. It's here. A copy of recording will be provided. And I just want to remind the farmers often tell me, they say that we're at the 1 yard line. We're not quite there. We're at the 1 yard line. And I think that with everything that we discussed, we have much work to do. I am so deeply inspired and appreciative of the panelists for sharing their imagination and soul works with everyone. And I think it was a wonderful way to celebrate Earth Day. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Moderator.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And on behalf of North Carolina A&T, just as we all say farewell here, have a happy rest of the Earth Day today in this 52nd annual, 52nd annual celebration of Earth Day. We hope it's a wonderful one for you and yours, and we appreciate you joining us for this special event at North Carolina A&T. Be well all. Take care.
Okay. All right.